So hey guys, it's Node.js. Uh, Here is where it begins. So let's go with a slight introduction about what we'll be doing tonight and how are we going to do what we're going to do tonight, and will you be able to do what we are going to do tonight. So for those who have joined the session to learn some serious backend development, or we're expecting that we will be creating fabulous REST APIs and stuff, uh, I would have to apologize to them because this is a session for Node.js, not backend development. So we will be focusing on the very basics of Node.js, how it helps us, what it is made for, how it's made. Obviously, we will be covering backend development also, but not that extensively, and it will be a little bit late. The second point is that we'll be covering the session in short buffers. I'll be explaining a few concepts, and then we will have a short round of Q&A. If anybody has any doubts, if someone did not understand what I said, then if I get a green signal, we'll proceed. And after that, we'll obviously have a hands-on session. The basics and the concepts will take around like 15 minutes or so. And yeah, if you don't know JavaScript, yeah, you can still attend. There is no issue about learning or knowing the specifics of that language. You just need to know what functions are, what are variables, and other stuff like constants, etc. That's it. Parameters, arguments. That's it. That is something that you must have learned in your basic programming course. Just give me a raise of hands if you have like studied all of these. Like somebody. Got it. Thank you for the response. So yeah, that's a lot of responses. Thank you. So before starting the session, a little bit about myself. This is how I look when I'm in Goa. Hi, I'm Soham. I will be in my final year in a couple of months, and I am very enthusiastic about open source development, and I'm currently exploring service meshes. So let's start about with something very basic, uh, with a question about how does a machine understand the code that you write. Maybe we should jump into some code writing some sketchpad, so that you'll be able to understand this a little bit better. Can someone just confirm if they are able to see the sketchpad? Yup, thank you, got it. So yeah, so a machine basically understands your CPU. Basically, if you have a processor over here, it only understands a stream of zeros or ones. That's it. That's all it understands. So when you write your lovely code, your hello world programs in Python, C++, or whatever, well, there is something that is responsible for converting it into some zeros and ones that your CPU can understand. So some smart people, like decades ago, invented something which is called as, wait, why is it like that? Why is it like this? Okay, this is very weird. I'll just write it. So some people called it assembly level language. Now what this did, this gave a little bit of abstraction on the zeros and ones. You could actually write some text, and then the text would be converted into CPU level code. But this was too hard for normal people to understand. So then we made some more high level languages, like for example, CPP, etc., like Python, which would be then compiled or interpreted, converted into machine language, machine level code, and then into zeros and ones. So this is how exactly your machine is able to run code. But your machine, as it is now, cannot run JavaScript. JavaScript is something that you cannot natively run on your machine. But if you just press Control Shift I on your web browser, and if you have ever looked at this console, then a very basic command in JavaScript, which is a print statement, which is also called as console.log. It just prints whatever you put it, suppose test. So as you can see, it writes test into it. So your browser is actually able to run JavaScript, but your compiler computer does not. Uh, Now that is because your computer does not understand JavaScript, and that is where uh, the browsers come into picture, because browsers have something called as the V8 engine. Uh, the V8 engine is basically a compiler that is written in C++, which enables browsers to actually understand JavaScript code and make it like readable. So what Node.js actually did, let me get back to the sketchpad.io. What Node.js does is Node.js uses the V8 engine, which is actually written in C++. Node.js uses that V8 engine. So if I have Node.js, okay, it's very hard to write on this. I'll be honest. I don't know how the professors do it. So if you have Node.js, what Node.js does is Node.js uses this V8 engine, which is written in C++, and lets you run your JavaScript code into your machine. As you know, C++ can be compiled into zeros and ones using their own compiler. So that is what V8 engine does. So basically, Node.js is actually written in C++. If you find it funny enough.
Oh,
So
can
yeah,
you repeat the V8 engine part?
yeah, I can sure. So C++ has a compiler called GCC or G++. If you have ever compiled C++ code, so similar like that, Google have had created a V8 engine which compiles JavaScript code, just JavaScript code, for the browsers in early days. So when JavaScript was released, so what Node.js does is Node.js uses this program that was created for compiling JavaScript in browsers, and enables a machine like your machine, like your computer, to run JavaScript code, compile JavaScript code, and like write JavaScript code.
So Node.js is a compiler.
It's not just a compiler. Like it's a software which has many other capabilities. You can think of V8 engine as the compiler. Node.js has a lot of other capabilities. It has a lot of packages. It has many other things that we'll see in the session that you can use. Not just the compiling part, but this is the one major thing that lets you actually compile JavaScript inside your PC. Otherwise, you won't be able to compile or run JavaScript. So that is one major thing that Node.js does.
Got
If
it.
that's, yeah, cool. So coming back to the slides, so let's go over to some simple questions as to why you should use Node.js. Like the role of Node.js, if you would ask me, the role of Node.js in a general scenario and in a front and back end scenario is to act as a backend server. If I just go back to this, the role of Node.js is, suppose you have a backend server, and suppose you have a web browser over here, and they are communicating with each other. So what the purpose of Node.js is that it is used to actually run those servers. It is used to simulate the request handling. For example, if you have a browser, suppose some Chrome, and it's requesting some URL, so the request is actually sent to your Node server, and the Node server responds with some response. It may be a HTML page, it may be a CSS, it may be an image, it may be some other thing. So in general, Node.js or Node is used for creating servers. The next question is, you should, sorry, the next point is that you should, yeah, you can use Node.js because then you don't need to learn an extra language for creating the backend. As you know, front-end development is already like many front-end developers use frameworks like React.js, Vue.js, or Angular, which are front-ends created on either TypeScript or JavaScript. So you can write front-end using JavaScript, and now if you use Node.js, you don't need to learn any other language for creating a backend also. You can also just copy paste code from the front end to back end since it's both JavaScript. Node.js has a very big community. If you go to their GitHub, or if you go to their page, you'll see that there are a lot of people connected to Node.js. And the fourth point, which I mentioned earlier, also that Node.js has a lot of packages, and also you can import a lot of third-party packages which are created for Node.js. Packages are something like your header files in C++ or your Python dependencies in your Python program, which you just import in your program code. So Node.js has a lot of third-party packages, which lets you write your code very easily and in a very minimal manner. So do we have any questions on this? Okay, what is front end, back end? Somebody just asked what is front end, back end. If I would explain it in a very easier term, uh, your your browser, your browser is the front end, and the server, which is basically just a machine. Okay, the server is just a machine on which there is a program running. For example, any program, a JavaScript program, a Python program, a C++ program. And that program, you can think of it as the program is in a continuous for loop or a while loop. If you know what for and while loops are, it is in a continuous while loop. And what it does it is it waits until it's told to do some task. For example, what like a request, and what the front end does it is actually makes a request to the code which is running on the server and listening. Hey, I'm just waiting for some request. You can send me a request anytime. I'll process it in the way that I am instructed to, and I'll return you a response. So that is what is backend and front end. Backend is just a program that is waiting for some input, and the front end is a program, an HTML code or something which is requesting something from the backend. If that's clear, Nilesh. Cool. If you do, we have any other questions? If no, then we can proceed. Can like somebody just type here, no questions. Okay, I'm going to assume that there are no questions now. So yeah, that was the basics about Node.js, why you should use it, yeah, where it's used, how is it used. So yeah. So can I just get a show of hands as to how many people are going to okay, so can I get a show of hands about as to how many people are going to do the hands-on, so that so that I can increase the interval of time that I have to wait after each step. Okay. Okay. So okay. So there are a lot of people. Okay. So there are a lot of people. So yeah, go a little bit slow. I suppose everybody has installed Node.js as instructed in the mail. So I'm not going to show you how to install Node.js. You can just check if you have Node running on your PC by typing node-v. Let's print out the version of your Node. Now, let's start by just running the server really quick, like running the Node program really quick and just trying to compile JavaScript code. So you can just type node into your terminal or command prompt or whatever you're using. It can be a shell also. And if you just press node and enter, it will show you a prompt and a blinking cursor. If I just zoom in a little bit more, yeah, it will show you a prompt and a blinking cursor, which means that there is some program that's running and it's waiting for an input. So this is the exact same thing as the debugger console that you see on your Google Chrome. If you press Control Shift I. So if I type something like console.log and pass a string to it, whoops, and pass a string to it. So as you can see, it's the same output as you'll get in a Google console. The other things that you can do is like var, name it something, assign it some number, and if you just type x, you'll get that number back. If you write x plus 12, you'll get that thing. So yeah, you can actually test or try to compile JavaScript over here in the console. But as you guys can see, if you want to write some meaningful code, or if you want to create a big server, writing all of the functions, writing all of the variables inside this console will be a very, very, very hectic idea, or will be a very hectic task to do. So if you are done playing with the console, you can just press Control C twice to exit the console. And what we are going to do is we are going to first create a directory in which we are going to work today. So I'll just go to directory that I will have, and I'll type mkdir NodeJS underscore workshop. This will create a folder by the name of Node.js workshop. You guys can do it too. And I'll just go inside that folder. And if I do an ls or maybe a dir on Windows, you'll see that the folder is empty. What you guys have to do is you have to open a text editor inside this folder. People who have VS Code can just use code space dot to do it. And it'll take a few seconds. As you can see, code editor has just opened in this on the screen. And as of now, there are no files over here. If everybody has created this folder, can I just get a show of hands? Okay, got it. So now let us create a file. Let's name it main.js. So we have our main.js. I use Vim. What do I do here? Well, I suppose you should not use Vim. We are going to do some extensive coding for like an hour now. I suppose you should use some text editor like maybe Sublime or VS Code or Atom or any text editor. If you have any text editor other than Notepad or something or IDE, it will work out. Yeah, Sublime works fine. So yeah, I just created a main.js file over here. And what we are going to do is we are going to just quickly go over a few of JavaScript concepts. So the basic thing that all of you must have seen is log statement, which is console.log, which just prints something into the console. If you have a terminal, if you have a VS Code, just open up a terminal. If you don't have VS Code, just go inside the other terminal that you have opened, save the file, and if you go over to your terminal, write node space main and press enter. Node.js will compile your JavaScript file and run it on the terminal or on the console. So as you can see, we have hello over here. So console log is basically a printf. or println or whatever. It's just print something into the console. You can have multiple arguments to it, like something like this. And if I just go and write node main, we'll get the same thing. Now the other thing that we are going to talk about are template templates, or you can say template literals. This is a concept which is found in a lot of modern programming languages, which is just substituting variables in a string. So if I have, suppose if I declare a variable, this is how we declare variables in JavaScript. You just write var. Suppose I have name. Suppose I have my name as a variable. Okay. And if I write console.log hello, comma, name, run this. Oh, what? Oh, sorry, it's my name. If I just run this, yeah, you get hello Soham. But this is like if you have 10 things, you would have to pass 10 parameters. So rather than doing this, what JavaScript developers do is they use backticks, which is the button that you will find below the escape key. That is called as a backtick. Backtick is helpful for creating template letters, and if you have a backtick, what you can just do is write dollar and two braces, and just write my name over here, and this will be treated as a single string. So if you have 10 variables, if you can just write the variable name over here, and it will be called. So if I just save this and if I just run this, the same thing will be printed again. So if anybody has any doubts up till the template syntax or the template strings, then they can ask. Otherwise, I'll wait for a few seconds and then we can proceed.
Can you repeat what a template is?
What?
What's a template?
Actually, people call it template strings, call it template literals. It is basically a string that will be processed. Like for example, in C++, you might have seen, if you have written C++ code, in the printf statement. Oh shit! What did printf statement? If you have a string, for example, variable equals to, and then you write %d, and then you pass the value of the digit that you want to print. For example, 12, suppose, or some variable name. So what it does is it substitutes the value of 12 over here. That is exactly what JavaScript does, but in its own way.
Got it. Thanks.
So what purpose dollar is used? Dollar is used to call the variable name. It's basically to write JavaScript code inside a string. You can write any JavaScript code inside over here. For example, I can do console.log inside here also. So if you have dollar and braces, you can basically write JavaScript code inside a string, and that code will be executed. You can play around with it later, because it's just a thing that is very like chill. It's not very necessary for the session. It's just something that I wanted to cover. It will work for any variable that you have. It's just JavaScript code. Oh, semicolons are not necessary in JavaScript. You can just omit semicolons, Ishan. It's not necessary for using semicolons. Shubham asks that I am typing node main internal, but I am not getting any output like hello. What do I do? So if anybody is not able to compile their programs, like for example, Shubham, can you just please unmute yourself and like, tell me what's happening, or why is there any error in your console or something?
Actually, I just wrote console.log hello, But
Yeah.
when I write a node main in the terminal, nothing happens. Like no, even no error is shown.
Okay. So maybe the terminal where you're running the code is not in the directory where you have stored the file. For example, if you check your terminal, it should show the name of the folder where you have saved the file. Like I have it saved inside this workshop folder. The file is in the workshop folder. So make sure that the terminal is inside the folder. You can use the command cd to go in and out of folders.
Okay, okay, I'll check it.
And this undefined keeps coming. What's that for?
Undefined is basically in JavaScript. What happens is every line of JavaScript, like every function of JavaScript, returns something. So when you write console.log, what happens is console.log returns some value also, and that is something which is like undefined. If you want to think like that, it's not something that you should be concerned about because this is a Node.js session. So just chill. Uh, it will work with just backticks, Vishal. It won't work with quotes or double quotes or single quotes. Uh, then Tejas asks console.log hello dollar my name any JS code is not working. Maybe we can take these questions later because we have a lot to cover. So if you guys have any questions about this, you can ask me later after the session, because there will be a lot of errors and we have to cover a lot of stuff. So if you just like are printing it like this, then it's fine. Like it's really fine if you're just printing it like this. It's really fine. It's not very necessary. So we'll just proceed for now. So the second thing that we should cover is functions in JS. So if I take a look at function, the simple way to write a function is, suppose I write a function called greet. Uh, greet. It takes in as an argument, let's say name, and what it does it is it returns a string, suppose a template string called hello dollar name. Have a good day. This, and if I just run this greet and I pass my name to it, I guess everybody should guess that it should return a string with the name that I have passed in. So if I run this, what this should have returned some. Oh wait, I need to put a console log around this. So yeah, it returns a string, and if I put a console log around it, yeah, it gives me hello Soham, have a nice day. So that is how functions in general work. But in JavaScript, we have a different way to write functions. These are called as anonymous functions. Now, I have talked about anonymous functions in an earlier webinar which I held a year ago regarding functional programming. If you want to take a look at it, you can check that video out later. It's on YouTube. But for this session, we are just going to take a slight look at anonymous functions. So anonymous functions are functions with no name, hence anonymous functions. Like functions of no name when we are defining them. Not exactly that it won't have a name ever, because if it has no name, then you won't be able to call it. Exactly. So just like Lambda functions in Python or Kotlin or other stuff, exactly. So if you know what Lambda functions are, or if you know anything like that, yeah, you're already ahead of everyone. So we'll just try to create a anonymous function over here. And a very key thing about JavaScript that you should always remember is everything in JS can be assigned to a variable. So if I just do this and write, I just copy this over here, then what is happening over here is this function, which obviously has no name, as you see over here. After writing function, I don't give any name to it. What it does is it assigns this function to this variable. So we have a name to this function, obviously, and whenever I call greet2, you will be calling this function. So if we check it really quick, if I have this, and if I call greet2 over here and I just comment this out for a second and just run this again, we'll have the same exact output over here. Now, this is not a very beneficial thing because you are exactly writing the same amount of code. What is the use of this? So using anonymous functions, you can actually reduce a lot of code, like literally a lot of code. So I'll be just showing you how you can do that. Is you can just delete this and add an arrow over here, which is equal to and greater than sign. And this will work exactly as it worked before. Exactly like worked before. Now you can minimize this a little bit more. If you have return only the parameter and the return statement, you can just omit all of the braces, even the return statement, even the bracket over here, and you can just write this. This is what your function will be. And this is how functions are in general also, right? Like you have an argument, it takes in an argument, it does something, like it processes it and returns something. So this is what it's returning and this is what it's taking in, and you're just assigning it to a variable. So if I run this code again, you get the same result. So rather than writing this is very beneficial for a lot of JavaScript developers. Why we are looking at this is because in Node.js, so let's just first come back to the chat and see if anybody has any issues with anonymous functions. Like if you have any questions regarding anonymous functions, please do ask. Or maybe if somebody understood what anonymous functions are, they can just boast about it in the chat. No questions. तेजस को सब समझ में आ गया है. No questions. Well played. Good guys. When can we remove braces? You can remove braces when you have this arrow between your argument and your return value. If you add this arrow, then you can just remove everything. You just need the argument and the return value. If you want, you can just, I'll just write one more. I'll make it a little more logical for you. I'll write double. I'll name it double. So what it does is it takes a number. I'll put an arrow, and what it should return is number star 2. So if you take a look at this, what it does is, what this function does is it takes in a number and returns number by 2. So if I call this over here and say double and pass it something like 7 and run this. As you can see, it just doubles it up. I hope double is not a keyword in JS. Well, if you write variable in front of anything, it can be used as a literal. It's cool. Yeah, I myself won't be exactly able to answer this question, like when can we use reserved keywords, because JavaScript is a very flexible language, I guess. I mean, yeah. Proceeding, like if everybody has grasped the concept of the arrow function, like if I can get a show of hands कि हाँ भाई मेरे को समझ में आ गया. Got it. Cool. I guess we have very smart people today. This is the concept of anonymous functions. Now, why I taught you is because we have, as I said, everything in JS can be assigned to a variable. Now, if a thing is a variable, then you can obviously pass that variable inside a function, right? So that is what we do in JavaScript. We have functions, which are actually values, and then these values can be actually passed into other functions. This is also called as composing, the composing functions. No need to get into a very big depth. So when you actually do pass functions into another function, they are called as callback functions. So in our code that we're going to look later, you will see code where you are calling a function. Suppose there is a function, for example, Node.js, as I said earlier, it provides you with a lot of other things rather than just the compiler. It provides you with a set of methods. It provides you with a set of packages. So one of these methods is the method called set timeout method. Now what this method basically does is it takes in a function as an argument. So we are going to use the exact same syntax that we just used earlier. And we can basically write anything inside here, any JavaScript code, which will be executed as a function. And also, it has a timeout variable, which is basically the number of milliseconds after which you want this function to be executed. So if I have this and I just write console.log, I am being written after 5 seconds. I just write 5,000 over here and just run this. I'll also remove all of these. And if I just run this, the console waits for 5 seconds, and they are very long 5 seconds, and then prints the thing that I had just written inside this function. So this part of the code is actually the exact same anonymous function that we wrote earlier. This is called as a callback function. And we will be using a lot of callback functions in the session. So if anybody has any doubts up till then, right now, they can ask. Oh, we already have one. Here we don't have to define the data type and parameter of a function, right? No, you don't need to define any data type. JavaScript just assumes that it is of any type. It's just like sleep in Python, exactly. It's exactly sleep in Python. The point that you have to note is that this is a function that is provided to you by Node.js. It enables you to write this function because somewhere in Node.js, this function has been defined and you're just able to call it over here. This is also called as a global function or global method. Now, if you want to, the next question is, in the set timeout, if I run console.log in a loop, then will it print after every 5 seconds? No. What set timeout does is it just is the equivalent of sleep, as as Heath said. This is the code that is executed after 5 seconds. So if you write a for loop inside this, what will happen is the for loop will be executed after 5 seconds. It won't be in a continuous loop. What will happen is the for loop will be just executed after 5 seconds. If that answers your question, yeah, cool. Now Tejas asks how to call a function from a function using arrow method. How to call a function from a function? I didn't exactly get it. Like, okay. I mean, do you mean to say nested methods? Tejas, Yeah, well, that is something that we are not going to need in this. And if you really want to see more about anonymous functions, again, I have a webinar uploaded on the YouTube channel. It's not more than 40 minutes. You can take a look at it anytime. It covers each and every topic in a lot more depth. It explains a lot of things that I'm literally skipping right now. But yeah, you can just take a look at that after this session.
fine.
You won't
Thank
need nested functions over here. Yeah. Devesh asks how to use more than one anonymous function. Where do you want to use more than one anonymous function? I don't understand it. Why do you need to use more than one anonymous function? Obviously, you can assign only one function to a variable. That is the thing. So if you want to do more than one, no, you can't do it, if that's your question. If you don't have any more questions, I'll be just showing you something similar to set timeout so that you can understand this a little bit more. And the function is set interval. So as you can see, my IDE is a little bit smart, so it just printed the structure of the function. Say if I type 1,000 in here, and if I type console.log inside this, what will happen is this function, which is an anonymous function again, which is a callback function to this, will be executed every 1 second. So as somebody said earlier, this will be executed like a for loop. It will be continuously executed, and as you can see in my console.log output, this line is being printed every time. And if you're doing it with me, you can just press Ctrl C to get out of the loop. So that was the part of basics of our functions, global methods, which we just covered. If you have any questions, I guess you don't. Then we'll move to the next thing, which is modularity. So modularity is a concept which allows us to import some stuff that is written in another file into some other file that we are actually writing our code in. So we are going to delete all of this because it's not going to be used. And let's create a new file. Let's name it, I'll name it necos.js. Yes, I'll name it necos.js. And I'll create a variable by the name necos, which will be an array, and we'll have cat1, cat2, and we'll also have cat3. So we'll have 3 cats, and if I write console.log necos, and now we don't have any code in the main.js. So what I'll do is I'll write const something and require, and I'll just write the path to the file that I want to import. So what this will do is it will, when I run main.js, it will also run necos.js. As you can see in necos.js, I have this console.log, which is being printed when I run this. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I know exactly necos. Yeah. So this is something that we have here. Now, another thing that you have is this variable. Let us see what happens if I try to log out ABS, which is the name of the variable, which is something that is returned by require. If I try to do this, you can see we have 2 braces. Now in JavaScript, 2 empty braces means an empty object or an object. It's just an object. So a thing to note is that when you call the require method, it actually returns an object, returns something. Now, if I try to call the array, which is necos inside main, if I try to do this, and if I try to run it, it will give me an error. Because even though I have imported necos, my main.js does not actually have the array yet. What this line is actually doing is it's just executing this part of the code. It's not actually returning me any value. And for that, we have to use something called as module.export. This is something. This is something that is readily available in Node.js, and when you assign it a value, let's assign it this for now. And if I save this file and if I run the main.js, we'll still see an error because I have the necos here. But if I scroll up a little bit over here, I can see that the value of apps that we are trying to print, Konichiwa, is printed, which I just wrote in module.exports. So what module.exports does is it exports the data that we want from this file, and the require method actually returns that data into an object. That is what it does. So if I just do this and delete this and create an object, as I said earlier, that braces is objects, and write necos inside this. What this line does is it exports an object from this file wherever it's required. So if I run the file again, if I run the file again, yeah, you'll see that we have the necos exported into this file. I'll just comment this out for now. It's not looking very good. Yeah, if I run this, you have this in the place of apps. Now, if I want to access the necos, I can just do is call abs.necos, and now you'll be able to see the necos which is being called from here. I'll just remove this from here. Now suppose you have some other data that you want to export. Suppose it's a variable called my age or something, and suppose you are 19 years old. What you do is you just put a comma, write my age, and that's it. If you just run it, you can see that the apps prints my age too. And if you want to access my age, what you got to do is you just write abs.myage, save it, run it, and you see 19 is printed over here. So this is how you can actually export things from a file to another file. You can also use this to export anything. As we discussed earlier, in JavaScript, everything is a variable. Everything can be assigned to something. So you can just export anything over here, any object, any variable, any function, anything. I'll not go. Yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, we can have questions right now.
Could you repeat the requirement for module of exports, even though we had used require /necos?
Exactly. What require method is responsible for is it returns what you have exported. Do you understand? If you don't write module.exports, then require method does not return anything into the object. If I run the code right now, it will say that abs is empty, and whatever I'm trying to print is not defined because I haven't exported anything from here. And this is basically not running anything. This is basically just running this and doing nothing. As soon as I export it and run the main.js again, the require method then knows ki, oh, I have a module.exports and it is telling me to export this and this. So what I'll do is I'll just take this object, pick it up, put it inside this, and Uske baad what happens, I don't care. Like what happens after that, I don't care. It's for the main.js to work with.
Got it. Thank you.
Abs functions like an object. Yes, abs functions like an object. You can name it anything. You can name it like this. You can name it anything. You can name it Nickos. You can name it anything. If I just write this, if I just write this and let's run this again, it will be exactly the same as earlier. Abs is an object actually. It does not function like an object. It is an object. It is an object. Kind of. Okay, never mind. Yeah, if you have, is abs a dictionary? Dictionary is something that we don't have in JavaScript. In JavaScript, what we have are key value pairs. For example, if you take a look at this console.log, just this console.log. Okay. What we have over here is this, the Decos object that is being returned over here. And if you take a closer look at this, this is one part of the object, which is the key and its value, which is similar to dictionary or lists or etc. in Python. But there are no restrictions as to what key and what value we can have. We can have any value to any key. Similarly, a key and a value. So yeah, it's basically a key value pair. When do we use const and var? Well, if you want to store something which is constant and which should not change, you use const. And you have a variable, you use var. Diksha. JD asks if there is any executable code in Necos, it will be executed first, right? Yes, as you can see, if I have console.log Necos, it will be executed first. Although JavaScript is asynchronous, which is something that we will talk later. But right now, yeah, it's executing first.
And does that what line did I write model export matter? Like if I write in the beginning or the end?
We can actually try that. They just ask that it is an object in JS, but working similar to a dictionary in Python, if I'm right. Yeah. I get what you're trying to say. Yeah, you can think of it as a dictionary in Python. Yes. Cool. If we have no more questions, and if we have no more on modularity, okay, we don't have anything on modularity. Good. We are done with modularity. Then we'll go for our next thing, which is file handling using Node.js. So I'll just create a file.js. And remember, guys, all of this that we are actually looking at is going to be used somewhere in creating a Node.js server. That is why we are discussing it, obviously. So the next part is what was it? It was file handling. So as we just discussed earlier, we can import packages from other places, and Node.js has a lot of packages which are inbuilt. One of them is called as FS. FS basically means file system, by the way, and you need to write FS over here. No need to write FS over here. You can just write anything, but generally people do write FS. So first we'll do file read. Correct. So I'll just create a file called as test.txt. You can name it as you want, and I'll write something like oops. Yeah, I'll write something like this, and then in our file.js, we will use this object. As we have seen earlier, that this is basically an object which exposes a lot of functions and variables and data and whatnot. What we are going to use is fs.read file. Now this method takes in a few arguments, like The first argument obviously is the file name, which is test.txt. The other argument, your old friend, the callback function, and also this callback function has two arguments, err or error or whatever you want, and data. You can name it anything actually, but for the sake of understanding, I have err and data over here. So this read file function, what it does is it tries to read this file, and if it has any error, it passes the error into this callback function on its own. If it's able to read it, it just passes the data that you have over here like this. So I'll just put an if statement that if there is an error, you log that there is an error, and also log that error into the console. Else, if there is no error, what you can do is you can just console.log the data. And if you'll run this, like if you're going to write console log error and console log data, what it will do is it will read the file and it should print the contents of the file. That is what everybody is expecting, right? If I run this, oh wait, I'm running the wrong file. Yeah, if I run this, we have something called as a buffer being printed out. This is because the data that is being read is actually sent in buffers, hexadecimal buffers, if I'm not wrong. Like if you want, you can actually translate this hexadecimal string into an encoded string, and it will actually translate to onegai. But for that to be done in code, you just have to call a toString method. If you just write this, run it again, and you'll see that yeah, we have read our file easily. Another way to encode the response is to pass some options to it. One of those options is encoding, where you specify the encoding. We are going to use UTF-8, and when you specify this, you don't need to write toString. It understands that you need to decode whatever you're reading, and you'll get the same output. So if anybody has any issues in reading a file, for those who are writing the code, and also for those who are trying to understand the code.
What is UTF-8? Can you repeat that part?
UTF is basically how your data is encoded. It's a scheme. There are a lot of schemes, like there is base 64 encoded data. There is base like UTF-8 encoded data. There are different ways in which you encode data. So you're just telling that this is how the data is encoded. So just decode it for me.
Oh, can you please repeat about that buffer thing? What was that?
So buffer is basically when you read a file, what your operating system does is, or what your machine does is, it returns a buffer or a stream. You can think of it as a large, if like for example, if you have a large tank, let's go over to the sketchbook once. Like you can think, oh shit. Yeah, let's go over here. You can think of it as like you have a large body of water. Okay, and you have a community of people that live. Okay, and you want to transport this water into their homes. So what you want to do is the water to be transported, but you can't take all of the water at once and pour it into their homes, right? So what you do is you send a few tankers. You send a few tankers, like 1,000 liters, or I don't know, like you just transport those tankers one by one sequentially as soon as a tanker is filled, it is sent to somebody's home. So these tankers are called as chunks. So similar to this analogy, you can think of your file as a pool of data. And what happens is your file is actually being sent into data chunks, which are called as buffers. And these data chunks are in either binary or hexadecimal. That is how files are stored, right? 0, 1.
Okay, okay, I got that. And that toString function then converts it in like what the text we have written in that file.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Okay,
That is
I
how
got it.
either you tell that you have to encode it like this, or you use toString. Either way.
Okay, okay, thanks.
I guess that answers Ishan and Dhruv too. If you can confirm. Yes, good. Okay. We are very far. Oh no, not actually very far. The next thing is actually client and server. After we have done, yeah, we have file read, we have file write. So it's exactly similar as read file. What you do is you call fs dot write file, and you pass in the name of the file that you want to write in. If it's not there, it will be created, and if it's there, it will be overwritten. Rule of thumb: if it's something that you're writing, it will be created. If it's something you're reading, then it will throw you an error that, oh, it does not exist. Please create it. Yeah. Anyways, so I'll just stop talking and start typing. Test.toTxt. We'll have a callback function. Now what that callback function will do is tell you that the writing has been done. Suppose I do a console.log and I'll say done writing. Now the most important thing that you have to do is to specify what you want to write. So that's the third argument. That is the only difference between this and writing. You give the data that you want. For example, if you have some string and you execute this code, if you execute this code, a text file will be made and the string will be written over here. That's it. The third thing is deleting files. That's also very fairly easy. You just write fs dot unlink, and then what you do is you write the excuse me, you write the name of the file that you want to delete. Let's call it test.test3.txt. The callback function, which will tell you if the task has been successfully completed and also if there is an error. So if error, you print error, else you just log done. I'll just create a file called test3.txt just to test it out. Yeah, so we have this file, and if we just execute all of the code, test3 is deleted, as you can see. Now, what will happen if I try to run this code again? Yeah, as you can see, it just gives me the error that I just printed over here, that no such file or directory. So that's one thing. Also, one thing about being asynchronous, if you look over here, even though I have written the write function after the read function, the read function is like printed later than the write function. Like this is being printed before this. This is something called as like this is something that happens in JavaScript because JavaScript does not wait for a function to execute. It just continues its execution and uh, does as soon as it's finished, it just prints whatever it wants. That is loosely what being asynchronous is. So yeah, it does not wait for the earlier function to be executed. That wraps our part where we understand file handling. If you have any questions, we can take them. Yeah, we have a question, I guess. When I did the write function, it erased what I was written and overrode. What if I want to preserve the original contents? Well, there are obviously options, just like you had options. Just like you had options here in coding UTF-8, there are also options that you can pass to this method, which I guess we should not discuss because we are really short in time. But yeah, there are some functions that you can, so options that you can pass that will determine if you want to append, write, read, whatever. Yeah, I can explain synchronous and asynchronous again. For example, if I just remove this code for a little bit, if I write log statement 1, if I write log statement 2, and if I write log statement 3. Now we have 3 log statements, one before the read file, one after the read file, and before the write file, and one after both of them. Now, if you try to guess the order in which these console log statements will be printed, you'll be wrong. As you can see, statement 1, JavaScript reads, yeah, statement 1, it executes it, we're done. Now it tries to execute this, but JavaScript knows that this is going to take time. So it starts executing the function, but it does not wait for it to end. It continues reading the file and executing the code. So it executes S2, and it sees that, oh, there's another function. It sees that, yeah, it will take some time to execute it, but yeah, I'll still execute it and I'll move forward. So it moves forward, executes S3. Then it sees that, okay, this has also like done the execution. So let's print this. And then it sees that, okay, this has also done its execution, so it will print either this or this. That is what asynchronous means, that the compiler or the program does not wait for a statement to finish executing before executing the next line. No. It depends actually. It depends. It really depends on the, like if you write like 1,000 lines over here, if I have this, if I write like hundreds of Yamete to the side, it might still show it, but that you can't predict the difference actually. You can't predict it. No. Yeah, exactly. The operations will occur in the increasing order of time required. Yeah, that is a statement that is 100% true. But you can't say that write will be always before read. No, that is something I can't say. Depends on the time that the function requires. If we are done, I guess. Okay, we have another question. What if? Yeah, we have the file.js over here. I'll just minimize it so that you can see everything. This is the file.js, and I'll take a size question. What if I want them to occur in the order that I want? There are ways to do it. There is something called as synchronous call. There is also called as something called as await. You can check them, but like we won't be needing them in this session. But if you want, you can maybe talk to me later after this session, or maybe you can Google themselves. You can just try Googling await or synchronous functions. They're like synchronous read, synchronous write. you'll be able to understand it. Yes, Node.js is asynchronous, exactly. I guess we are done. If you don't have any more questions, let's move to the client and server part. For those people who have waited for an hour, for those people who were very enthusiastic to learn about the full backend and front end communications, we have, yeah, we are there, guys. We are there. So coming back to something that we discussed earlier, we have, let's draw that diagram a little bit neat because we will be needing it to understand this. So we have our backend, and we have a front end. This can be a browser. This will be a browser generally, and this will be our Node.js server. And as we saw earlier, browser sends something which is called as a request, and the backend sends something which is called as a response. These are the two things that happens. Now, so this is something that regularly happens as soon as you try to hit a URL. For example, if you type a URL, that URL is like something like www.something.something. That URL is connected to an IP address, and that IP address corresponds to this server that you are trying to reach. Now let's just assume that your browser magically knows that www.xyz.com corresponds to this IP, which is the IP that you want to actually access, which is the IP of the backend that you want to actually access. It is somehow magically known, which is actually a very different concept, but let's just think that it's magically known. So now this IP address has a few ports. Now, if you have seen an IP address, it is something like 192.168.0.0, something like this. Three dots, four numbers, and sometimes it's also followed by a colon and something like 3000. So this is a valid IP address. So similarly, what your browser does is your browser requests for a URL. Something translates the URL into an IP, and as soon as the IP is hit, the backend returns a response. So in this scenario, this is the client and this is the server. So what we are going to do is we are going to create this server over here. So we'll just dive back into our VS Code, close all of this, create a new file called server.js. Okay, and now we'll do const http require http. Excuse me, guys. Yeah. Let me just drink some water. I don't have corona, by the way, for those who are wondering. So we import a package that's again readily available for us because we have Node.js installed in our machine. So the very easiest way to create a server is just to write var server equals to http dot create server. Yeah, and this is a method that takes in a callback function. your friendly neighborhood callback function, and takes two arguments. And these two arguments may look very familiar to you. The first argument is the request. The second argument is the response. And I'll just write console.log and the server has been hit. Now if I just open a terminal, write node.server.js, it does nothing. That is because your server object has been created, but it's not listening to something. So what you need to do is you need to write server.listen. What this method does is it, you can think of it as it creates an infinite for loop using some parameters. The first parameter is the port, that is 3000, and also a friendly neighborhood callback function. I'll also again write a log over here and I'll type the server is listening. What it does is as soon as the server is started and it's listening on this port, it will print the server is listening. And now if I run this, you'll see that the server is listening and the program does not exit itself. It's waiting for a request. Also, this port is you can think of it as an address, that you'll put in your web browser. That's all you can. So, if you guys have any questions, you can ask me right now. Oh, we have a question already. It's back in the read and write. After console log, you put semicolons, but usually you don't. Was there a specific reason? No, there is no reason. It is just something that the IDE does. You don't need to write semicolons. Like it works without semicolons. You don't have any issues. Other than that, if you have any problem in understanding these 9 lines of code,
And what was the 3000 for?
it is for telling the server to listen on this port. Your your machine has some reserved IP addresses. As I told you earlier, that every website correlates to an IP address. Some of them are public IP addresses. Some of them are private IP addresses. One of them is called as the local host. Localhost is an IP address which is also 127.0.0.1. This is an address that is private to your machine only, exactly as Sahil printed in the console. Now, each IP address has several ports. You can think of this as sub compartments to each IP address. Like if you have one IP address, then this is another IP address, this is another IP address, this is another IP address, this is another IP address. So you can have a lot of IP address using several ports. You can think of ports again as, for example, if you have a USB hub, you connect the USB hub onto a single socket onto your PC, but the USB hub itself has 4 or 8 ports, right? So even though you connect different USB devices to the USB hub, they are connected to the different ports, but at the end of the day, on the PC, they are connected to only one socket, right? So even though you might have like many ports, at the end of the day, they have the same machine. You can think of it like that. You don't need to worry about like a lot about what ports are, Vishal.
And every integer is a valid port.
There are some reserved ports there are some unreserved ports. For example, port number 80 is for sending HTTP requests. There are some other ports which are reserved for SSH, etc. You can take, like, you can Google them anytime, but not every integer is a valid port. There is a range, and inside that range there are reserved and unreserved ports. So 3000, 8000, generally, like the 1000 to 10,000 range, I guess, or I don't remember the exact range, but yeah, you can always use 3000, 8000, 9000, 5000, no issue. So
Again, REQ and RES are supposed to represent.
they are supposed to represent this this that we just discussed, the request that the browser sends, which is received as an object in the backend, and response is the thing that the backend sends to the front end as an object. This is exactly what it is: the request that the browser is sending the backend, and the response that the browser will, sorry, the backend will send the backend.
So console.log is the response.
No. Console.log is not the response. Let's take a look at what happens if I hit the port 3000 on localhost. Let's see. If I go localhost 3000 on my web browser and I hit it when the server is running, you see that we get the console.log, but we don't get a response, right? You see that there is a console.log, but we don't get a response. We'll fix that later. Let's first, like, if you don't have any more questions, let's talk about the request object first. Then we'll take a look at the response object. So if I can get a show of hands as to if everybody understood what or how you create a server. Okay. Got it. A lot of people got what I was trying to say. If you don't, it's okay. It's just that you create an object called like from http.create server, which takes in a response or a request and response, and then you call a listen method, which takes in a port. And yeah, well, when you hit it, nothing happens as of now, but something will happen. So let's go forward and take a look at the request object. The request object, if I try to print it, let's remove this. Let's try to log the request object. And when I do this, and when I do save that and refresh my web page or try to hit it again, you won't get anything else. We'll just get the server has been hit again. For example, if I do localhost 3000 again and hit it, you'll get again the server has been hit. If you hit it again, you'll get the server has been hit. That is because once you have made changes to the server, you need to close or stop the server and run the server again. Only after that will the changes be reflected. For example, now I'm hitting it, and as you can see, a lot of stuff is printed. Like a lot of stuff. Oh, fish! My tokens are over here. That's bad. Okay, but a lot of stuff is open here. So the response object is something that has a lot of stuff in it. I'll just point you towards two important things that are in the request object. One is the request.url. The other is the request.method. Okay, if now I'll just stop the server, run the server again, and I'll hit the server again. Take a look over here. You see that it prints a slash and get. So in this line, the slash is the request URL, and the request method is get. If you are thinking about what get is, so there are several request methods that a browser can use to tell the server that what kind of a request this is. So one of them is a get request. It just means that yeah, I am hitting this URL. Return me something like a HTML page or CSS or an image or something. That is what you tell it. And the URL is just slash. So if I just go over here and type slash about and enter, you'll see that we have about now. So request.url just gives everything after the slash. That is one thing. Now, if you go back over here and if you go inside your network tab in the console and hit it, you'll see that there is something which is created over here. There is a record created over here. And if you go over here, oh shit, my tokens are over here. I can't show it to you right now, but yeah, there is something that is created over here. And if I just open an incognito tab and hit localhost 3000, good. If I hit localhost, yeah, there is something that is created over here. And there is something called as request headers. Now there is a lot of data in request.headers, which basically tells the server a lot of stuff behind your back. So we need to really remember this, and we'll see this a little bit later. So as of now, we still don't have anything on the web page. So let's just work on that. We looked at the request object. So if anybody has any questions on the request object, they can ask right now.
Oh, can you show your inspect element page again in incognito mode?
Yeah, sure. If I hit it, you see a request is created for localhost 3000 with the request URL as this, the refer policy as this, and there is a lot of other stuff which is called as request headers. This is just data about the data that you're requesting. For example, are you going to accept encoding in the request? What type of responses can you accept? Like you can accept text/HTML, you can accept this response, you can accept this response, and a lot of other stuff.
So it's telling what it's capable of?
Accepting, or what the data, like it's basically metadata. If you know what metadata is, it's metadata for the request. Data about the data that you want.
And can you just repeat the get part?
So get part is basically when you create a request, your browser basically tells the server that yeah, this is that kind of request, or it tells the server that the kind of request it is. So there are a few types of requests. One of them is a get request. Other is a post request. There is also something called as a put request. There is also patch. There is also a delete request. These are several types of requests that just tells the backend that, okay, this is the type of action that the browser is expecting the backend to do. For example, the get request tells the browser, the backend, that the browser is expecting to get something back, get a response like an HTML or something else back from the backend. There are the other ones tell the server to do something else. For example, a post request actually tells the server that, hey, you have to write something in your database, and I am sending you the data now. That is one thing. You can see about the request methods maybe later after the session. We just have 25 minutes more, so let's get going. If we don't have any more questions in the chat, do we have any more questions in the chat, guys? Yeah, hi Dhruv. You can check more about HTTP headers on Google. Exactly. Cool. Then let's proceed to, I guess, the second last part of our session. Yeah, let's get to the second last part of our session, which is the response object. As Anirudh pointed out, that we are sending the console.log as the response. So no, that is not what we're doing. what we do is we use this object to send the response. For example, we can do response dot write, whoops, response dot write, and if you pass something to it, hey, this is a response, and when you try save this, and when you try to run this, you still won't get anything when you hit localhost. Although you'll get a hit, you still don't get anything as a response, and that is because you have to also call this method called request dot end. As soon as you call this and start the server again and go to your browser and hit it, you can see that yeah, we have a response, which is a response, which is a good enough response, I guess. Now you can also try to send HTML as a response. As this is just like plain text, what you can do is you can write tags like h1 and something like this. If I stop the server, start again, hit it, you'll see go to server. If I open it on the incognito and if I inspect it over here, you can see that we have actual HTML tags here. And the browser automatically adds the HTML head, etc., and body. It happens automatically. So that is how you send responses. Yeah, you can send anything as a response. I don't know, like it's up to the browser how it's like going to like process it. It will obviously, I guess, show it as a plain text. I don't think it will show it as like markdown. But yeah, anyways, you can also send markdown as a response. Can we embed a URL in end, like an anchor tag or something? Vishal, do you mean like an anchor tag?
No, like we are sending the code. So if we send a URL of a HTML document so that it get rendered there.
Okay. So you mean okay, got it. So you mean you want to render custom HTML documents, right? Rather than writing it over
Yes.
here. Yeah, we'll just take a look at that after we have question. We have no questions. That is the thing that I was going to come to. And what's the point of end? And basically tells that yeah, there is nothing more in the response that we want to write. You can just send it. You can think of end as send. You can think of end as send. Soham 2021.
And all of this, which written the server, they executed no matter which port I hit, right?
No, you need to hit port 3000 only. As the server is listening on 3000, you need to hit only 3000. If you go to any other port, for example, port 1000, you won't get anything. If you hit port 8000, you won't get anything. You need to hit 3000.
Okay, and what if I'm listening to two ports and I want to respond things based on which port's been hit? Uh, I can do that.
No, you can only listen to a single port for now.
Okay, got it.
Do you like you can do sub like URLs relative to your um, localhost. Like you can do this. Like you can write about and render different web pages depending upon what the user has in the request.url. You can do that. You obviously know that, I guess. That is something that you can do. So yeah, if we don't have any more questions, we can write 3000 and 8,000, right? If you want to take a look at it, I'll just write it and I'll just show you what happens. I actually don't know if it will work. Oh, it's working. So if I have 3,000 or 8,000, if I hit 8,000, it shows nothing, as you can see. But if I write 3,000, it shows me this. So writing this won't work. Anyways, so let's just go to the next thing, which is returning HTML pages. For that, we'll use an old friend called FS. If you remember this guy, FS is something that you have imported. Now, I already have an HTML file that I have created. I'll just be using that file from my PC. Let me just copy it. Yep. So I have an HTML file, which is this. So I just copy it over here, and I have this small index.html. Now, if you want to render this HTML file into a response, we go to the server.js, and inside here, what we do is we write fs.read file. Wait, why is it not working? It should work.
Const fs.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so now we have fs.read file, and now we'll just call fs like we did in file.js. We'll pass it the name of the file that we can read, which will be our HTML file. You don't need to pass the encoding in this case, and error and data. So I'll just write it over here. fs.read file. Your file name will be /index.html. You'll have your callback function. It will take error. Whoops. And data. Now what we'll do is, if there is an error, we'll just write the error back into the console. If there is no error, what we'll do is we'll do response.write data, and we'll response.end. Oops, we'll write response.end. And also we should write response.end even though there is an error, because we want that response to end. Yes, or yeah, that's something. So if I stop the server, start the server again, and if I go back to the page and hit this, there should be a file that's rendered. Let's see why it's not being rendered. Okay, we have unhandled error event. What? Right after end. Oh, sorry, we have a response.end after this. So I just remove that and run the server again. And if we hit localhost 3000 now, we have hello, I am home, the HTML that we have had before. This is how you can read a file, use response.write, and then write that file into your response. Can you paste that file here so that we can code along? Yeah, sure. Very small. You could have written it in like 5 seconds. Yeah. Also, no, you can't. It will work only if 3000 is busy. I don't think. Maybe.
Oh,
Let's focus.
no, no. In that case, like what is happening is it checks whether 3000 or 8000 is true or not. Since 3000 is
If 3000 is
already true,
true, it
yeah,
won't
it
check
returns
for
3000.
8000.
So like if you do 0 or 8000, then it will pass it.
8000.
You will get 8000. So it is not, the logic is simple, plain JavaScript logic. Like don't get it
Yeah.
confused.
Actually, they are not familiar, but yeah, those, thanks for pointing that out. Actually, we were short on time, so I didn't answer it pretty mm, in a way that they would understand, I guess. But yeah, if you do this, I'll just come back to this. What this does is it checks if this part of the statement is true, and if this part of the statement is true, then it just returns or it just uses this part of the statement. And since any positive number other than 0 is true, server.listen will just take 3000 and will just ignore whatever is written after that, or that was the reason. And what? Okay, good HTML code, Vishal. Good HTML code. So if you don't have any more doubts on how you can return a response as HTML, good. So since we have some minutes, what we'll do is we will try to we will try to create a folder called views, and we'll create 3 files inside it. Index.html. One is about.html, and third one would be error.html. And I'll be just filling all of these files because I already had the HTML that I need to put. This is for the about. This is for the, yeah, and for the error.html, I'll have this. So you can just create something similar to what you had created over here in the views folder. I have some pre-created HTML, so I'll just use that. You don't need to worry about what I have written in that. The only thing that you should be concerned about is that it should be some HTML, some HTML basically. So if you take a look at the website once, you have hello, I am home over here. Good enough. Like it's good enough. You're getting a response, right? But now if I try to hit something else, if I try to hit about, it will still give me the same exact response as this. If I try to hit anything, actually, if I type anything, and if I try to hit it, it will still give me hello, I am home, which is not something which is desired. We'll try to fix that. We'll try to fix that in the last 10 minutes that we have. So for that, we'll obviously be using FS, and to do that, what we'll do is we'll create a simple variable called paths. I'm just using path because I have created a folder called views over here. I'll do views. If you haven't created views, you don't need to add paths, but I have, so yeah, I need to do it. After that, we'll have a switch case, which will take the request.url, and we'll start writing cases. For example, if there is the request.url is slash, what you need to do is you need to write paths equals to index.html, and also break it. If the case is slash about, you do path plus equal to about.html. Also break this, else or default path plus equal to error.html. Now, as soon as you write this code, what will happen is your path will either have views slash index. Sorry, we need to have slash index slash about and slash error. So the path will have either path will be either views slash index HTML, or would be views slash about, or will be use slash error, which are these three files over here. Now, I have created this inside the read file. We'll just cut paste this code outside the read file, and then instead of this path, we'll write path, the variable that we have over here. So this path can have value views slash index, or views slash about, or views slash error, which is already dependent on the request.url that we had, which is available in the request object to us. The rest of the code, I guess, is exactly the same. So now if I stop the server, if I start the server again, and if I hit localhost of 3000, you see a you see a beautiful website over here. And if I try to hit about, you see a separate or a different page is opened here. Home and about are a little bit different, like the contents are a little bit different. And if I go hit about in my web page, it will render the same thing that I got from the buttons here. And if I go and write some gibberish, we'll get the error page. So that was, I guess that was basic. Okay, we did this. Okay, so that was basic routing, and you sent back HTML pages depending upon the URL. Yeah, I did not include CSS files associated with those HTML because we don't have time for that. These guys can actually explore this once they have the grasp of what response and request objects are. Okay, you want to see the code again? Bye. Okay, yeah, this is the code. This is the thing that I have added. It is a variable called path and a switch case, which takes in the request.url that we saw earlier. And depending on the URL, if it's slash, if it's about, or if it's something else, it assigns path the exact value, or the exact value of the file that we want fs to read from. So if I have this, fs will read from index.html inside use folder. And in the subsequent cases, yeah, that will be the case.
And why is rest.end required after console.error?
Why is rest.end? It's not required, but if there is an error, you want your response to end. Otherwise, the browser will be just waiting for a response and will be just like circling around, not having any response, which is not good per se. Right? You don't want your browser to be continuously waiting for a response. So you just send an end response. And yeah, we have 5 minutes. So if you have any questions on this, if you want to check any part of the code that we covered, if you have any doubts regarding what we have seen, yeah, you can ask me.
Could you go a bit down?
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, so we have a question from Sandeep. Sandeep asks, where does the IP address of a server go? Can we put it where we put the port number? Say 192.168.1.0, 3000. I actually don't get the question. Like, what do you mean by put it where you put the port? Oh, exactly. You mean right over here?
Yeah, if you've got a server running on, say, .10 machine, and it has to respond from that particular IP address. So could we put it there?
Actually, no. The server listen only takes port number as the argument. but I guess there are other packages. Like I was actually going to cover something, a third-party package called Express. If you want, you can take a look at express.js. I guess express.js gives you a capability to do that. If not, I don't think there is an option. It will always run on localhost. I don't know exactly if you have the capability in this package, but you can obviously check it out on in express.js.
Okay.
Express.js
Yeah, you
does.
can do that. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, I guess this marks the end of the session. I'll just stop recording. I'll say thank you for everyone who have endured these 2 hours of me constantly talking, trying to be humorous, trying to teach something, trying to show you something. Thank you for staying. And if you have any questions, you can ask. I'll just stop the recording and we can have some informal discussion.